What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Average American Podcast, the podcast for the average American by the average American. I'm your host, Nathan Tate. And this week, I think I got a good one. I took a week off last week. It's just holidays been crazy, man. We've been doing something every weekend for the last month and a half, since before Christmas started. And yeah, it's definitely been, oh, just feels go, go, go. You know how life can be. Um, anyway, so I had a really interesting interaction last weekend when I went to visit some of my friends. And, one of my friends is on the opposite political spectrum than myself, I think. And I say opposite in terms of our staunch views. I think we have malleable things that we agree on, that are both historical and socio political. Um, facts that can't be disputed or ideologies that definitely make sense. And then we have our things that we disagree with, and it ended up getting into, a bit of a heated debate about some DEI, a little bit of black victimhood, things like that, that I really share different opinions with him. And, he dated and almost married a black woman, so I think it probably hits different for him. Um, but yeah, we definitely, almost got too shouting as elevated voices. So, when you disagree on political ideations, I think a lot of people get upset. Rightfully so. I myself do too. I think these are things that we think are the benefit of all humans, whether it's for a specific denomination of individuals or not. We all think that like our ideas are the ones that are correct, and so we stand on that principle. And the thing is, I realized in that moment, though, when we were debating that, as much as I pride myself on having information, I didn't have the information ready um, to dispute well enough to change the mind of the individual I was disagreeing with. And I think that, a lot of us don't look at it and see that the onus is on us to make sure that we have the information to change the argument or to simply dispel an argument that makes no sense. The straw man's, all that kind of stuff. And you'll get people who will steel man a straw man argument. If that is confusing, it's essentially saying that someone who will stand firmly behind something that has no basis, but they believe it fully. I shit on liberals a lot, but that's really a lot of liberal opinions are like that. Like if you're, you know, and that's 2026 liberal, not 1990 liberal. 1990 liberal is conservative compared to today's liberal. Um, and it seems to be that maybe it's something that changes as the history goes on because a 60s liberal could have been conservative in the 90s, and a 90s liberal may have been probably considered far right now by what they think and all that kind of stuff. But the point I really wanted to make about that was, one, I want to get into the subject that we really seem to clash about more than anything. And then I also just wanted to point out that, like, I didn't end a friendship. That wasn't the end of our friendship. We got upset. We both took a second, minute or two, cooled down, came back, and it's fine. Like, the reality is, so many people think that they're if you disagree with someone on an ideology, that you cannot interact with that person. Like, I can't believe you disagree with what I think. That's crazy. I've never met anyone that I agree with 100%. Never. My whole life. And, it's my parents, my family, my friends. Like, I would be remiss and I would start to think something was wrong. And I think most of us would, because that's the problem when you enter an echo chamber. You lose sight of it. There's a great story that Joe Rogan talks about with Steve Martin. Where back in the 80s, Steve Martin was doing really, really funny stuff. He was one of the first, like, on the road big comedian acts with, like, Dice Clay, Mitch Hedberg, and people like that. And Steve Martin ended up giving up stand up comedy because it got to a point where the crowd would laugh at everything. And he said, I could no longer tell what was funny. I don't know what's funny anymore because they laughed at everything I said. Um, And that's kind of the same thing you're looking at here when you sit in an echo chamber and you never get different. Um, ideas put to you or like suggestions, stuff like that. Someone doesn't challenge your ideas or your beliefs and make you stand by them, and then you come to terms like, I don't know as much about this as I probably should. And so then, you take it upon yourself to go and like learn more and educate yourself on the things that you don't know. I went and visited another friend this past weekend, and I thought it was really interesting that we were talking about, and we share much more like-minded ideas. So the conversation was much more amicable. Even if we had a disagreement about something, it was the slightest of disagreements. Um, but even then, we talked about the fact that, as an example, the Bolshevik Revolution. I've heard it referenced so much. I gotta be honest, I have no clue what the fuck the Bolshevik Revolution was. I have a faint understanding of who the Bolsheviks were, and that's a faint, faint, faint understanding, as in their reference to what they did and who they were. Um, but I really don't know what it was, and it's this like significant time in history and this point. And I will be doing an episode on the Bolshevik Revolution for my own interest, and things that I want to know, and I think to just anybody who sees that episode, hopefully to give them a lot of information that they wouldn't have understood about that, because it's apparently a very significant event relative to maybe what we're dealing with right now. I don't know. I have to look into it. Um, but either way, it's one of those things where I pride myself on having people who disagree with me and people who agree with me, and that I find common ground with all of them, and that I don't let the basis of these principles that I think are something I have to stand by undoubtedly be the reason that I can't have a friendship or be an acquaintance of or anything like that to someone who disagrees with me. Um, you know, it's not like fucking saying, "Oh, my friend's a pedophile." Like it's not. We have differences in opinions on fucking the topic I'm going to cover in a minute. DEI. Like we have differences in opinions on how that kind of stuff coerces white privilege, all these things that I think are a little too talked about for something that's not incredibly prevalent for our day and age and the things we're doing right now. Um, so, and that's one of my really good friends. Dude, I love the guy and I think he's a great person. We just don't see eye to eye on that subject. And I think that's great, to be honest. I think it's great that we don't. And you get pushed and you get challenged for you to learn more. Now, I don't know if he's going to learn more, but the fact that he pushed back is the fact that I'm like, okay, then I need to come with the facts and more understanding of something, which also I think is interesting surrounding this subject. So I'm going to get into what I got some notes here. So I typed in the good and bad about DEI, statistical analysis. Just let's eliminate opinion, right, or attempt to, and go based on statistics of how it benefits people. Now, I want to preface this by saying that diversity is obviously already important. Diversity of thought is important. It's what gives you the ability to get different viewpoints that allow you to make the most informed decision. Whether that's with business, policy, in your personal life, it's really, really important. And it's not a color thing; it's a perspective thing. So that's one point I want to make. That diversity is important. I diversify my language. I diversify my opinions. I diversify the video games I play. We diversify the shows we watch. So diversity gets a lot of like flack. Diversity in and of itself is not a bad thing. It is a good thing. But it's when the other part of that, I think, the equity, the inclusion part of it, that we become, at least myself, as someone who's had to work hard and like get where I'm at, and I'm not even that successful. I'm relatively successful, like good enough to do okay. Um, and I think just a lot of us, at least people I talk to, um, look at these DEI programs, and it seems to create something that's based on extending an arm to someone without having them earn it. And is that wrong? And is that something that should be scaled back? Or are we looking at it incorrectly? And so this is what I found as my DEI summarization. So I'll just go through the 4 plot points I have here. And this is just an AI summarization. I'll get into the fact of what I looked into the articles of. But the DEI can lead to better business performance, innovation, and recruitment. Okay, I think we could all agree that like diversity in and of itself, as I said, leads to all of these things. It's important to be diverse in terms of thoughts, opinions, culture, things like that. Concerns about DEI are perceived as a bad thing. It reveals no actual statistics, seems to provide a bias. I think we can both infer what kind of bias that might be. It states that both economic impact and consumerism benefit from DEI programs. It's what I saw specifically said 2/3 of American consumers will be more willing to purchase from a diverse and equitable and inclusive environment, which I think is a load of horseshit. I'm not going to a place and going, man, there's a lot of black people working here. I just feel way better about buying stuff. No, that's fucking stupid. I've never once done that. The like what I care is that the person there is well informed, good at their job, makes it accessible for the customer, carries a good attitude. I know we're all at work, so I'm not expecting you to be my best friend, but being professional and friendly, I think, is important for everybody in an environment, even when you're having a confrontation with a customer, which I've had, over the course of my life. I mean, not old, but I'm 30. I've been through some times at jobs and shit. Uh, and this is what I wrote down. Large takeaway is that there are almost no positive impacts to removing DEI programs, which raises concerns about a specific narrative being pushed. And this is what I really think is very important because even if the person I was arguing with was correct about DEI programs, right? And they have statistics to back it up. The problem that for me becomes is that I started diving into, and I only got like 10, 15 minutes in, and I started diving into and trying to read articles, and none of them, I mean, none of them had any statistical reference to what can be bad about DEI programs. And that just, I mean, I become incredibly questioning when you are telling me that there's nothing bad about something. Okay, everything, even the best things, capitalism, which built this country, you know, business then got into politics. And now we're dealing with the fact that, our economy runs our government rather than our government regulating the people and allow the economy to steer itself. Policy and things are motivated by money, not by, building a good society. So even the best things that we've developed have a negative downside to them. That could probably be statistically proven by impact over the course of years. And DEI programs specifically, we've labeled them DEI, but DEI programs in general have come around since the Civil Rights Act and all that kind of stuff. And so um it's just one of those things where we've worked to get away from what is a tumultuous past. Like anybody would say slavery was bad, Jim Crow laws were bad. Emmett Till, the burn, the Black Wall Street, when it was burned down. I mean, you look at the racist past that's been America, and it's bad. That's just, I think, accurate. But the reality is, every fucking nation on the planet has a bad racist history. All the Asian nations were enslaving each other, and is it making it better? Like if we had enslaved a bunch of white people, would that have been better because they weren't of a different race? That seems dumb. I mean, just the idea is stupid. And then you eliminate the discourse about the fact that Africans sold Africans into the East Atlantic slave trade. Um, and prisoners of war were sold into slavery. I mean, it was much less common. But it's like, why do we ignore that? Why do you choose to ignore that? That's a reality of the situation. Everyone was partaking in, terrible things at the time, slave labor. And then the real question becomes, why are we, only in America are we so focused on this? And we like take a minute and try to say like, oh, it's worse here than it is anywhere else. It's like Japan doesn't allow for immigration. How many black people are there in Russia? I'm sure there's not a ton. So we are the most diverse place on the planet. It's not even an argument, not even close. And yet just the fact that, like, people are tired of being told, white people, especially myself included, tired of being told we're bad guys just for being white. Like, I didn't fucking do anything. I'm just white, bro. That's it. Like, it's crazy. Why am I a bad person? Because I'm a white male. Because you associated that with the negativity of the past. This is 2025, not 1865. We're not in the Civil War. We're arguing about transgenderism and cultural racism, which doesn't seem to exist. The whole idea of white privilege is kind of crazy to me. It's I thought Jeff Dye, who's a comedian, had a really good point about this, where it's just like majority privilege. Like the majority of people are white, so the most amount of people doing a thing are going to be white. It's kind of like the way I used to look at high school football. Like, um, if a school is a whole lot larger, your school has 2,000 students, their school has 5,000 students. They're more likely to have like some outstanding athletes. They're more likely to have people that are, supersede whatever your best person can do just by the pool. The pool of people they have to pick from is 2.5 times what you have. And so that's just the fact that the majority of white people live in this country, or a majority of this country is white people currently as it stands. There's a little bit of issue I take with that. Um, but either way, that's always how it's been since the inception of the country for the most part. And so these things you talk about where it's like a white person is more likely to get a job than I am, it's like there's just more white people. And I'm not going to sit here and say that no one ever makes a decision based on factors you can't control, such as your age, your race, whether or not you're attractive. I mean, all of those things play a point, and we try to put laws in to prevent that stuff. But realistically, the laws are vague. Um, the company could easily prove that they didn't do anything discriminatory. My dad's convinced that he can't get a job because of his age, and he could very well be true. But the problem with an at-will employer like we have here where I live is um the at-will employer can fire you for any reason, and they could just say it's poor performance, and it could be discriminatory, but it would be on you to prove that. Or retaliation maybe for something. It would have to be easily proven as retaliation for something. Such as you like, reporting a manager or something like that. Not like you fucking up at work and then getting fired for it. That's not retaliation. That's just you not doing a good job and getting fired. That's different. So I think a lot of what you see is that, you know, the majority gets the most of the opportunity, but wouldn't that be prevalent anywhere else? If I went to Africa and I was like, man, I keep getting passed up on jobs for black people. That's just crazy. It feels like there's black privilege here. Well, 90% of the demographic is black people, probably more than that, I'm sure. But, it's the same thing as going to Asia and living in an Asian country and then going, I feel like Asian people are really getting jobs and I'm not. I don't know what that, brother, out of 500 jobs, you've got 1,000 Asians and 10 white people. You might get 5 white people that get a job, and that's pretty good. That's a 50% demographic. So it's one of those things where, like, and the reality is the prosperity that black people, or other races in general, Asians, Indian people, black people, have enjoyed in the last 30 years, I would even say 20 to 25 years of business, especially now. There's more black billionaires than ever. Hip hop music is the music of the time, which was cultivated by black people. And, we have like a few token white guys who get into that, and are accepted as part of the culture. But even then, they're still shit on by purists who think that white people aren't allowed in those spaces. And it's like, what happens when the script flips? Okay. When white people become the minority, and a significant minority, and it might take 50 years, it might take 60 years, maybe I won't be alive for it. But at that point in, 2090, um, are white people allowed to then say like, "Hey, we feel like we're being discriminated against," or is it just always like, "Fuck white people" forever? Like it's very confusing, and you go down a dark road where like this sets a precedent for later on for other cultures to do this to you. And not to mention that like the culture we've built here, we don't like it's your job to assimilate it. It's not our job to integrate you and what you do. You can bring aspects of your culture, like Mexican culture. A lot of people respect Mexican culture. They've been here for a long time. They have a really cool culture with some really cool practices, and they make great food. And they take a joke, and they can be really funny. Like Mexican and American have had a long storied history, and black people are the same way. They've been here. They never left. Some of the funniest comedians out there are black. I mean, Dave Chappelle's one of the funniest comedians around. And whether or not I disagree or agree with their politics is irrelevant because I think that they're talented individuals who deserve to do what they do. Jay Z is a smart businessman who pivoted from a rap career. 50 Cent is really good at what he does in terms of entertainment. Has been since he did Get Rich or Die Trying. Like he made a movie, flipped an album, um, and he did an album before that. I can't remember. I think it was The Massacre that came before that. But the point is, they've all leveraged themselves. Oprah Winfrey is one of the richest people that we know of, and she's a black woman who's been doing daytime television for who knows how long. So, you know, you can say like it's secular, da 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 da, but the reality is that most of our entertainment business is dominated by people of color. And so where's the white privilege there? Idris Elba is one of my favorite actors. I don't know anybody who's a better actor than Denzel Washington or Samuel L. Jackson. The Rock has been so big for so long. Kevin Hart became huge. So we elected a black president. Whether or not he was good is not the point. It's the reality is that you sit here and say like, and he said that Donald Trump made racism more prevalent. And it's like, no, racism never went anywhere. They just suppressed it, if that's what you want to say. Like if you were probably on X, you probably saw people that are vehemently racist on there. And there are people that are vehemently racist. And I think everybody has a little prejudice in them. You know what I mean? It's like white people can't season their food. Black people can never be on time. Like there's weird stereotypes about it. Asian people can't drive. There's weird stereotypes about every culture or race of people that we all adhere to and believe and think is funny, but there's this weird dynamic where if white people say it about anybody else, it's a fucking problem. But we can get shit on. And I just think that equal shitting on everyone is important. Like, it's not racist to say these things. There is some prejudice behind it, but we all have prejudice. You probably have prejudice against something you had a bad fucking interaction with. If you had a bad interaction with a specific kind of dog, you're prejudiced towards this kind of dog. Does that make you a dogist? Like, what are we talking about? We're talking in loops about something that everybody experiences. And everyone knows that these are the realities of the time we live in. And it's never been easier for someone to be successful than it is right now. And us standing at each other's throats because of small, cultural disagreements is pretty crazy because as a unit, as the citizens of the United States, the most important thing we have to do is to fucking hold the government accountable. And we've all done a really shit job at that. Unfortunately, I didn't really get into it in the last few years, but we've done a horrendous fucking job at that. And there's such a small secular part of the population that really actually cares and is involved daily. I mean, I don't know what the statistic is, and I should look it up on how many children are in the United States, like the percentage of population. But you only get about half the population votes in any major election. In the last two major elections that we had, and maybe even in the last three, like with Trump. I don't know how many were on Obama, but I'm sure it was a lot too. So we've had a lot of participation, but then there's at least, I'm saying, 25, 30% there that's probably not participating in elections, either due to a lack of intelligence, a lack of information, a lack of accessibility, whatever it is, a lack of interest, whatever those things are. You have a large portion of the population who's not participating in the democratically elected um, offices, and what they mean for them. And really at the local level is where it's most important. We all focus on the president, Congress is incredibly important, but like your local community is super important too, especially if you plan to be there for a long time. Um, which unfortunately for me, the community I'm in, I did not plan on being in for a long time. It's just the circumstances of life have put me here for way longer than I wanted to be. So I may have gotten involved in the community stuff way sooner if I knew. and I'm still not getting involved because I really don't want to fucking be here. But if things go the way they are and we end up buying a house in the next few years like I want to, we may be here for some longer time and I might have to try to become involved in my community councils. Things like that. It might be something to be looking into how to get involved in that because the local level is going to be the most day to day impact you're going to experience. But even our state regulations are super important for people to participate in the primaries, who you're electing as senator and governor. I mean, a lot of people think of us as the United States, but what they fail to realize is that almost every state is a individual country of some kind that has its own regulations that then relegates itself up the ladder to the federal government, who then sets out the precedent for the law of the land. But state to state, generally, and this is one of the things I think that people in the government didn't like about Trump and that I actually did like about Trump is like the Roe v. Wade thing. He was like, we'll leave it up to the states. I think that's good. I think that's important. I don't think the federal government should regulate all 50 states. I think that the states should have way more say so in what goes on in their state because then people can move from state to state and live in a place in which fosters an environment that they actually care about. The policies that go on in that state would be much more effective for the individuals that live in it rather than a sweeping policy that may affect people over here positively on the West Coast. And people in the Midwest are like, well, this fucks up everything I got going on. And this, I really don't like what this is. And this culturally does not mesh with what I believe in. So it's just one of those situations where um, the divisiveness we have is so bad because you have about a 25-25, and then you have another 25 to 30 that's not participating in any way. And so if 40% of us got together, that's a large enough demographic to really make change. But if it stays in fourths, roughly, then you can just control those fourths easily. That's what they do to us all the time. Um, and I know I've gotten away from the DEI stuff, but I think it all correlates in the fact that like this is the kind of inclusion we need: inclusion and discussion, political discourse. It was funny. I sent a video to that same person I was arguing with, and it was a video that maybe lent credence to what I was saying when we were discussing and having our debate. And he was like, weird that he cut off the comments so there couldn't be any discourse. And I didn't even think about the fact that happened and really thought that some videos were just published without commenting ability, but I didn't realize that the content creator was the one who set that precedent. So it does raise a concern, I think, and a question for someone to be like, well, why aren't you allowing people to say their opinions on these words you're speaking? Even if they're facts, somebody's going to have something to try to refute what you're saying. Now, some people make shit up. That's just the truth. But for the most part, if you have a conversation based in fact, then, there's not much to be discussed. So, take a breath here. For all of that to be said, is like this is the inclusive part, the political discourse. Whether you like Charlie Kirk or not like Charlie Kirk, he was about inclusion in political discourse. And I think that we're getting away from that. We're becoming more socially distant from thinking our neighbor is someone relative to us who has the same, dilemmas we face every day, which is I need to get gas, I got to go to work, what do I buy at the store, what am I making for dinner? Like all the same day-to-day shit that we all do, all of us live that. And the reality is some of the people that, we look up to, celebrities, politicians, whoever it is that you champion, they don't. There's a story about, George H.W. Bush where he had never been in a superstore and he didn't know what a checkout scanner was. Like that's how far removed some of these people are from regular life. I mean, Jeff Bezos doesn't go to the store, man. They don't do that kind of stuff. Someone does that for them. And so we are the ones who know what we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And I think more of us need to take a chance of hearing the other person and what they have to say. And don't get me wrong, there's people we can't have a conversation with. I think there's far fewer of them than it seems. A lot of people, when proven wrong, can take that and say, okay, I wasn't right. And that's okay. I'm fine with that. But then, with this DEI stuff that I'm looking up, and I see no negative anything, that's a problem. If you can't identify the negativity that exists in it and say, well, this is how it like negatively impacts stuff, but the positive impact outweighs the negative impact. Okay, that's a discussion we can have, and a discussion you could win, depending on what side you're standing on. But when you say it's all good, nothing's bad, I don't believe you. Okay? This feels like COVID. It's like, take it and it'll stop the virus. Oh, that didn't work. Well, you just have to get boosters. Make sure you wear a mask, but then we find out the masks are ineffective. Like, it's just gaslighting to the 10th degree. You're just fucking telling me that you're right with no way to prove that you're right. But if I tell you you're wrong, then I'm a Nazi or a racist or a bigot or whatever it is you want to say I am. And so, you know, that's just crazy. I don't understand how you can sit here and have an argument, but there's nothing that allows for a counter argument. And that's where I stand with this kind of DEI, all that kind of stuff. Is that if I can't even find statistics that how this negatively impacts you to see whether or not the pros do outweigh the cons, then I think you're blowing smoke up my ass. And I think it does nothing, actually. You're telling me that businesses are 35% more profitable because of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm going to say that's just because people have gotten smarter, they've innovated, and when you have actual diversity based on merit, not diversity based on race, then you'll have, better opinions. There's going to be a black guy out there who's smarter than the white counterpart, or an Asian person, or a Hispanic individual. Like, people of all races can be intelligent. Like, that's not a thing. But it also depends on the culture. And, like, culturally, for black people, a large section of their population is culturally being held down by what they believe, think, and say. And so I think that, they in turn push that outwardly because it's frustrating and they're not sure how to fix that. And the reality is the only way to fix it would be for the prominent individuals of that community to help lift them up. You know what I mean? If you were talking about poverty rates, I would say there's probably more impoverished white people than there is any other demographic because we have the most people here. So if you're talking about statistically, there's going to be, like, poor white people are going to be the most. And it's weird how, like, I see, leftists will argue, like, well, in all the red states, that's where they're using all the welfare. But then they'll come back and say, well, like, black people are the most disadvantaged. But I thought, like, you were just saying that, like, poor white people were the demographic of the red states that were using all the welfare. And they're the ones that use the most of it. But then you're saying that black people are the most impoverished and disenfranchised individuals in the country. You see how the contradiction that you come up with is only you confirming your echo base and the bias that you stand on. It's just one of those things that people say, do as I say, not as I do, kind of thing. And if you have any type of intelligence about you, you're not going to fucking, what? No, that doesn't make any fucking sense at all. You're stupid. You're stupid. Why are we talking? Um, and I think that leads into the next thing that is important for me to talk about, which is the Renee Good thing. Um, I think we've all seen kind of as much as we can see about the Renee Good situation. And I just want to say that it's terrible and tragic when someone dies. I think all of us feel that a little bit. Someone with kids, any individual, gets shot and killed for whatever reason, whether a person did it to themselves or it was done to them wrongly or unjustly. However you look at it, death feels senseless. You don't want to see anyone die by something other than natural causes, or disease, something that's not an external factor of another person ending someone's life. And so I will say this is that you put yourselves in these positions and then you don't like the repercussions of the choices you're making in the moment. You're standing up for people that have no actual rights in our country. I'm sorry, if you're illegal, if you're not a legal citizen, or you're operating on a visa or some kind of legality that states who you are in the country, I don't want you here. I don't. I'm not for you being here. I don't want you to be here. I don't need you to be here. Neither do we, regardless of what our government thinks, with the cheap labor that, goes to industry and business. We don't need to supplement our workforce with impoverished multicultural individuals illegally coming across our southern border. And whether you agree or disagree with that, you exercise your right to protest. Sure, that's fine. March in the streets, do what you want. Although I would argue to say that that's now a laughed at practice. We laugh at people who practice that, which is unfortunate because protesting is one of those constitutional rights that's protected. And so protesting should be a way for you to express your displeasure without it being a joke. But between the No Kings thing, the BLM stuff, which turned out to be a whole lot of horse shit, not in a principle or idea, but simply just what it was. I mean, go and look into who was doing it. That lady is being persecuted for illegal misuse of funds. So the entire BLM movement was a whole bunch of horse shit. And, um, you know, you put yourself in these positions. You agitate an individual with a firearm. You sit there and you do it to him all day. That guy had already had problems previously, which someone I heard on a different podcast had said that he shouldn't have been on the job. That could be a fair assessment to say that that individual was mentally unfit based on trauma he received to be in the line of duty with a firearm. So that is a point to be considered. However, you're agitating these people, constantly berating them, attacking them, doing whatever you can to disrupt what they're just simply trying to do is their job. Whether you disagree with their job or what they're doing, that's a different subject. But when you actively impede someone of the law, whether or not you are in the right or wrong, you are putting yourself in a dangerous position. And you end up in a sort of FAFO. And unfortunately, the find out part a lot of times is getting fucking shot. Whether or not that's life ending, life altering, that's the severity of the situation. But you can't go at an individual with a vehicle that has a firearm. Now, in the video footage, there's one that shows like he's being hit. There's one that shows he wasn't being hit and he discharged it out of fear. Not here to debate that semantic part of it, because the end result is a woman died, and we have to understand that that accountability results on both sides. That guy should be better trained for those situations, and or not in that situation in the first place. However, this woman is, agitating a federal enforcement officer and not expecting anything to happen to her. I mean, the two intersect. You can say both people made poor choices. You could argue that he was held to a higher standard because he is the one with the firearm, but why are we as citizens not held to standards? Why is it we think we get to act lawlessly? There's a certain level of decorum that you're supposed to carry yourself with law enforcement, whether it's law enforcement you agree with or law enforcement you don't agree with. We I get not complying is like your first instinct when you didn't think you did anything wrong. But if she would have just gotten out of the car, that may not have happened. The guy told her to get out of the car. At that point, I'm going to park my car and get out of it. I'm going to try to sort it out with this guy. But you don't. You ride your emotions. And then you don't get out of the car. You try to take off. You peel out. That guy gets scared. And then he shoots you. And it's just, there are just so many people that say she deserved it. No, she didn't deserve it. She does not. Nobody deserves to be shot. I'm sorry. I don't agree with that principle for myself. Whether you do or don't is not important to me because I know there's people on both sides of that who think it was atrocious and there was no reason for it. And there are people who think, well, if we'd have done this before, we probably would have never got to this point. However you look at it, I don't think that the violence is the answer. The discourse is always going to be the answer, which is why you can say, oh, this cop was in the wrong in whatever situation it is. There's plenty of situations where the cop is in the wrong, but you sort that out in court. And unfortunately, we have a broken legal system too, where you lose that part too. Guess what? Life sucks and shit is fucking, you know, shit is bad sometimes. That's just the reality of it. Sometimes you get slapped with some shit and it's bad. And the only thing you can do is to try to make the best out of it. And you can mitigate those situations by making smart preventative choices for whatever you're dealing with. And I would just, you know, tell the people that think that it's a good idea. You got people now out in neighborhoods with firearms. And I'm not arguing that you're not allowed to protect your neighborhood with firearms, but you're protecting illegal immigrants. Just to think about what you're talking about. This isn't your neighbor that, was born here, deserves to be here, earned the right to be here, is a productive member of society. These are illegal immigrants. People who fled their own country to come here, who refuse to integrate to our culture that we've built, bring their own culture. I mean, with the whole Somali thing and the fraud and, Tim Walz coming out and say it's racist and white supremacist and all that shit. And it's just like, dude, how many buzzwords can you fucking use? I'm staunchly anti-immigration. At this point, the developed world needs to teach these other countries how to build themselves up rather than just taking in all their refugees. You know what I mean? What did we do? And unfortunately, I wasn't born in the late 1700s so that I could stand up for the American Revolution and try to be a founder of this country. Unfortunately, that wasn't for me, because of the whole time thing. Being born in 1995, I mean, unfortunately, I wasn't around. Um, but, there was no way that they would think that they were going to win. The British were an empire. But they thought to themselves, it's better to die this way than to live oppressed. And there's so many people who just think somebody's going to come in and save them. And it's like this American imperialism that you think is coming in to save your country, actually it's just coming in to drain you of your resources, put in a regime that fucking supports our ideologies, and nothing about your life is going to get better. The only way for you to make your country better is for you to build the infrastructure of it. You, as the people, have to do the revolution part. America cannot come in and revolutionize it. Russia cannot come in and revolutionize it. China will not come in and revolutionize it. This whole thing with Venezuela, where they think that, we take over with Venezuela and then everything's going to be great for the Venezuelans. I highly fucking doubt it. Ask the Iraqis. How the fuck did that go? How did American imperialism work in Iraq? I'll give you a hint. It wasn't fucking good. And so you have to learn how to stand up for yourself in your own country. And I know it's easy for me to say sitting here in America in my living room, but there's no other choice. There really isn't another choice for you. We cannot just take in everyone who doesn't want to live where they live. And then the craziest idea is you thinking, if you come from one of those countries and you get here, that there's some kind of entitlement that you deserve to be here. Get the fuck out. Are you kidding me? You don't deserve to be here, bitch. Just because you made the trip to come here doesn't mean shit. If someone traveled to my house, came into my home, and disrespected the fuck out of me, I'm going to get him out of my house. That makes the most sense. So if you come into my house, America, take your shoes off, wipe your feet at the door, say thank you, and do the fucking dishes on your way out. Okay? That's called being respectful. Something that a lot of you motherfuckers lack. Something that a lot of people, other cultures and parents didn't fucking teach them, apparently. I went and hung out with, I have a good friend of mine who's Indian, and so I went and hung out with his family a week or two ago, and his family's lovely. And his mother's great. And, she made us all a bunch of food, which I'd never had before. And it was all tastes really good. And I liked everything I had. But she wouldn't let us help clean up and all that kind of stuff, at least for the guests and all that. So it's a different cultural thing. Now, I would still do the dishes in my house. I wouldn't ask my guests to come over and do the dishes, but we all were willing to help clean up because that is a respect thing that we have as our culture. And so it's okay for her to say, well, in my home, you're not required to help clean up. If I went to India, her home, and I was a guest there, and they said, no, you don't have to help clean up. We built this for people to come and enjoy. That's perfectly fine. Here in America, we have a different pretense about it. You come in, you are polite, you are respectful, um, you know, and don't break anything in my house. Don't dirty my house up. Don't do any of those kinds of things that would be frowned upon that what I would consider disrespectful. You hold yourself to a high standard, and then when you decide it's time to leave, or we decide it's time to leave, you say thank you for the opportunity. And how you would become a permanent resident of such house would be for you to contribute in a way that would be too difficult to ignore. Ergo, you made my house cleaner than it ever had been, and so I was like, man, I'd really love for you to stay here. That would be awesome. You could do that, and then I could help you. I provide for you and all this stuff, and you would do these things in exchange. But instead, a lot of you just come into my house, eat my food, trash my house, and then when I say, this is really fucked up, why are you doing this in my house? You go, I deserve to be here. Who are you? This is my house, bitch. What are you talking about? You came here. You opened the door on your own. And out of politeness, I didn't just take you and throw you the fuck out, which is what I would do in my real house. And so this entitlement prospect that people have that come into this country blows my fucking mind. I had it when I was like 20, 21. And I thought the world was against me, and I thought I was owed shit and all that kind of stuff. And then I realized one day that it only gets better if I fucking try. Like, I have to make it better. And over the course of the years, I've done that for myself through hard work, discipline, accountability, adaptation to my environment, and changing things about myself that needed to be changed. But, let's just bring over a bunch of motherfuckers, tell them they don't have to integrate into our culture. They shit all over the street, and then they're like, are you going to clean it up? No. I'm going to kick you out, and then I'm going to clean it up. I'm not going to clean it up so you can shit on it again. And I think that we're just facing a lot of that. And then there's a whole section of people who are already shitting on the street that are like, yay, more people to shit on the street so we can all make everybody who cleans it up look like the bad guy for not cleaning up the street shit. Brother, I'm not dealing with that. I don't like you already in this country living off of welfare, not having a contribution, having a ton of kids you can't take care of because you can't keep your fucking legs closed. That's already bad. But then on top of that, you're like, we need to bring in a bunch of people who can't provide anything for our infrastructure and simply live off of other people's hard work and tax dollars. It's absurd thinking. The line of thinking of it is just fucking stupid. And if you're someone who agrees with that, I ask you, please come forward and tell me how the fuck that makes any sense. And you're going to hit me with the sob story about, well, it's hard in their country and things aren't great. Yeah. You ever heard of Jamestown? Most of those people died. The Jamestown colony, the original one, after Plymouth Rock, most of those motherfuckers died, by the way. It was hard. And I'm sure those people hated every minute of it, up until their last breath. However, they fought year over year over year to make this place what it is today. And as an American, as someone who is proud of the country I live in because it's the best social experiment that's ever been conducted, both in terms of its economic prowess and its diversification and cultural and societal or socioeconomic ability to provide someone the pathway to get out of poverty faster than any other place that's ever existed without being under the thumb of the government and having, autonomy over their own choices and body and their property. Some on the property thing, obviously the government with the taxes, you're really renting the land you sit on, but still, as someone who's proud of all that ingenuity that my forefathers put forward, and you come over here and you disrespect it, all I've got to say is fuck you. Fuck you. I don't want you here, don't need you here, and I'm really tired of people on another side of the demographic trying to tell me that those people fucking deserve to be here. They don't. They don't. And, I think that's it. I think I got everything out today. As always, I appreciate you listening. If there is someone listening, comment, like, subscribe, whatever you feel like doing. Just watching was cool for me. Appreciate it, man. Everybody have a great rest of your week.